So,
Okay.
okay. All right. So, hi, Sherry.
Hi,
We're recording.
Gina.
So, Sherry and I were talking about feminine, our feminine side. And so, I don't, if, would you mind kind of repeating that if you can remember what you said? And then we'll,
Yeah, not at all.
okay.
So in the curiosity of my mind and all of these kind of traumatic events just recently, really just in my 50s, right? In the last few years coming up around the left side of my body and knowing what I do about the left and the right and the masculine and the feminine, realizing that the left side of my body is a symbolic to my feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back over the course of my life to when I lost my dad, and really, this is really soul searching, right? And how I've managed my life since the age of 13. So much of it has been through the masculine energy that I possess, and that force. And when things don't in my mind, I wasn't perceiving them as working out or going the way that I wanted them to, I tended to resort to my masculine energy, to the control, to the force, a lot of times to the coercion and the manipulation, and forgetting or maybe not remembering the softer energies that I also possess, where I don't need to show my strength in that way. And I had a teacher years ago say to me, Sherry, you are a very powerful person in the way that you move through your life. But really the question is, are you using your energy and your power from your masculine side or your feminine side?
Mm-hmm.
And at the time I understood it maybe from a textbook sense.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Hear you.
I lost your sound. Oh, wow. This is interesting.
It
Okay,
just switched to my outside speaker. Sorry about that. So
okay, there you go.
so anyway, just really trying to understand uh, the lessons that are coming up on this left side,
Mm-hmm.
the broken toe, the melanoma, and then of course this traumatic injury that I had when I was hiking. Um, and I think really then how do I begin to implement that? And I've had those moments. I think like we all do when we've started the process of waking up. I've started to start connect the dots, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
of when I'm in that place of forcing things to occur and when I'm in that place of surrendering, and how that feels. And I always go back to, that's kind of my, I guess my barometer is how I'm feeling when I'm using that power, and recognizing when I'm wanting to control a situation or when I'm surrendering to it from a place of love and compassion.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Yeah, so I've been doing some thinking about this and kind of exploring this, and it's interesting you brought it up today because I think when we talk about divine feminine and healing the feminine piece, we've lived during a time where we adapted and we utilized. I'll talk in general. I'll talk about for me, but I think it applies because of what you said too. I think it applies in general, but to be able to succeed and to be able to survive through the situation that we've had on the planet, which they call it, it's called the patriarchy or whatever, but it's imbalanced, it's unbalanced, if you will, masculine energy that's been there for quite some time. For us to make our way, we had to grow our masculine muscle. Okay, so and we've done that. So when we talk about healing, bringing the divine feminine forward and healing the divine feminine, it's not against the men or against the masculine. It's actually within each of us to figure out how do we balance our masculine now and live in the feminine energies of attraction, of more softness, of more nurturing, of those nuances versus that direct, because you need both, and we all need a balance of both. But we've been, because of the situation, and we adapt, we've adopted, as females, we've adopted the masculine, you know, to fill a role or to, succeed, or to what we feel like is survive. So So for me, a lot of the journey has been trying to recognize my feminine more within me and bring it out. And the only one that's stopping me from doing that is me. It's not anybody else, and it's retraining me and my normal, like, habitual reactions to things in a new way, rather than saying, okay, I would have gone about it this way, but the times are different now, so let me try a new way. And it feels different. If you ever write your name with your right hand or your dominant hand, and then you try to write it with your other hand, it's a little slower, it feels more uncomfortable, and it's not as free flowing at first. You have to be really conscious of what you're doing. And that's kind of where we're at, I think, as females right now, is being really conscious to let our feminine side be the one that we bring out more of. And I was having a discussion with somebody the other day, and it was like trying to define what feminine is without comparing it to the masculine is very interesting, right? So we always want to say it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. It's like, well, what is it? What is it for you, and what is it for me, and how do we start to bring that out and bring that to life? And yeah, the left side of my body has always been different than my right side of my body over the years. And so I'm trying to pay more attention to that. And energetically, you can breathe differently, and, try to awaken your left brain, and do creative things to try to awaken the left brain, because that's where the more creative, artistic language, those more feminine qualities, what we call divine feminine qualities, are there. So yeah, and I've seen people in my life who've lost their father early and tended to do what you said you did, which was, you tried to balance it out in the family unit by adopting those characteristics. And then it just became who you were, right? It just became
Yes.
normal and natural. Um, so I don't know how that resonates with you, how that feels, what I just described.
It absolutely resonates, and that I tend to get, when I'm having my little epiphanies or downloads or whatever word we're putting on that, those ideas that come in, and we're not quite sure where they came from. What the visual I got when you were saying that, and I could see it, like I was watching a movie screen, was a pendulum swinging.
Hmm.
And I feel oftentimes that I I've swung so far to one side that to counteract that, I have to swing equally to the other side until I'm able to find, like you were saying, that place that's in the center or of more balance. And so I oftentimes will find myself, and maybe that's why these physical manifestations continue to arise or seem to on the left side of the body. I find myself almost play acting
Mm.
what I view as the feminine role. I'll find myself, and I don't want to say growing smaller, but it's a softening when I'm in either in a group or I'm one on one, where I'm allowing uh, I'm allowing myself to pull back and not feel like I either have to be right, or I have to interject, or I have to dominate in any way. And so it does at times feel like I'm acting, and that, I don't know how else to put it. It is really
Oh, you're breaking up again. Can't hear you again. There you are, I think.
there we go.
Yeah.
Until I know, like you said, until I know at a cellular level what that feels like to do as my new norm. My
Mm.
new norm, I guess that's the new phrase, right? In the world today, the new normal.
Yeah.
So does that resonate with you, that kind of play acting?
It does, and I'll tell you, but I'll tell you where I'm at now, kind of like the journey that I've been on with it is, I used to think the pendulum thing as well, but I think we can stay, and we don't have to swing, like all the way. We can, if we're in our awareness, can find that nuance in between. I'll say that was one thing. The other thing is the energies right now are rewarding the feminine approach. They're ripe for that kind of attraction energy and that thing. So for us to fully come into, as a world, that power of that feminine approach, who's better suited to bring that forward than the feminine, if we can get ourselves in a balanced way? we can get ourselves in a balanced way. But if we don't, can you still hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, and Gina, I'm going to go. I have my speaker on because I listen to music, and that's where we keep the disconnect. I'm going to go in and disconnect from the speaker.
Okay,
So
I'll pause this
I'll be
here.
right
I'll
back.
pause this. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so we're back. Yeah, so I was saying we can, I believe we can, if we stay aware and conscious, we can keep from having that pendulum
That
swing.
big swing.
Yeah, because I mean that's, to me, that's not going to be really good for all of us if we're trying to get to a
It's
balance.
not sustainable, and it almost at times feels bipolar, right? Because you're swinging between these two very diametrically opposed energies. And what I'm finding is the more that I'm acting or practicing in the feminine, I'm finding that my voice, and a lot of times my practice is around boundaries, right? Like that's where I'm getting to practice, I think, more of what that masculine energy at least appears to be to me, where I have strong boundaries, but the boundary is set with love. Does
Hmm.
that make sense? So I'm getting to practice it a lot with different people, and I find that the universe is providing me that opportunity really to get to practice where I'm able to set a healthy boundary, and yet set it with so much love in my heart for all parties involved.
Yeah, it's like about love, unity, nurturing, connectivity. That's a large, that's all those energies that, for me, kind of are feminine in nature as a basis. And right now, even though on the world stage it does not look like it is, right? But the energies are attracting that if we can become balanced. So if you all of a sudden have a feminine operating system, but all of your programming is made to run with masculine language, and I'm not talking men and women, I'm just in this unbalanced masculine way, then, it's not going to work well. And we see all the chaos, right? So if we can learn to practice in a feminine platform and go about things differently than we would in the old way, we're going to see much more progress on these issues and in life in general. And I can say that whenever I can stay in that balanced way, life seems so smooth and it seems so joyful and it's very ease. I'm at ease with it because I'm not on guard anyway.
Yes.
And so what I feel though is for us to make headway in that, it's for me, it's the females. I mean, for us, it's us getting balanced, within ourselves and be able to practice ourselves in that new energy. And then the masculine comes along with us because they were as they had as much difficulty as we did because if anytime they try to show feminine traits, they were considered weak or made fun of, or I mean, all kinds of things, even more so than what we would have been, because at least we were girls, and they would say,
Yes.
you're being a girl, kind of thing, versus, you're being a sissy to a boy.
Boy.
So they had less chance to practice it. So we had chance to practice it. So if we can become balanced, then we can help bring along the collective on these new energies.
Is kind of, I have to tell you right now, Gina, it's kind of blowing my mind how this broken toe and me bringing it up to you is segueing us into what's happening in the collective. And I I equated it to me in my own, but didn't really equate it to what you're seeing, because I find myself, when I'm attached to what's happening in the collective right now, my masculine is definitely being stoked and emboldened
Mm-hmm.
right now, because from my perspective, what's happening out among the majority of the world is happening from that, not only the masculine place, but the negative qualities of the masculine,
Right. It's
right?
not
It's
not
almost
the
like,
divine. Yeah.
exactly, it's almost as if their pendulum swung so far that way that the only way they know to project it out of themselves is through negative action. And then I find it emboldening and strengthening my masculine. And when I'm able to either disconnect from it or switch my own mindset then it doesn't have the same impact on me. And I feel like if it's happening to me, and those of us that have begun the awakening process, imagine how those that aren't there are feeling with this.
Yeah. And I'll say that if you look on the world stage, what's coming up as you say that is it's not a men women. I mean, we oftentimes say it's men versus, it's a masculine energy. I mean, the women are being as venomous in some cases from an imbalanced masculine as the
Absolutely.
men. So it's not men women.
Exactly.
It's this, this harsh, and it's unbalanced, not divine masculine. It's that the dark, if you will, the darker side of the masculine. Like we have a darker side of the feminine. We both have those. You have the manipulation that can be positive to the good, or you have manipulation that can be negative to the, that's very much a female trait in a way. But the masculine, have those dark and light sides too. So it's because of the imbalance, and us not holding the same space for those more feminine energetics in the situation, then yes, it's going to keep perpetuating what we're all conditioned to respond to when we get challenged, right? So, what I've taken it as a way of saying, here's my challenge. I'm choosing, am I going to go this way with my masculine? Where's that lead? Long term, how's that going to feel? Or am I going to follow the energetics that I'm feeling and follow my heart, strings, and try to foster it that way? And I mean, love to me is very much more powerful and has that attraction energy and melts things if we can hold that space. Whereas if you push against something, you're going to get that same thing back from the universe, right? So if you hold love there, love comes back to you. If you pierce and you fight and you push and you hate, I mean, that's only going to come back to you because it's just a reflection of what you're putting out. And that is so apparent right now in the world, and people are blaming each other for things, but it's a mirroring of what it is that they feel in their heart that they're projecting. That's going to come right back. It's going to come right back.
How do you So I find when I do turn the news on, especially with my mom here right now, Fox News goes on, and then I feel the energy in the room as she's yelling at the television. Everything increases, right? The level of the intensity. I guess that's a good way to put it. Everything elevates, and I'll find myself getting pulled into that when I'm watching the newsreels, the same ones that we're all seeing over and over of statues toppling and people beating each other, all the violent part of it that we're seeing. I find that stoking then inside of me, not that I'm going to go out and topple a statue or beat somebody up, but I feel whatever I'm watching, I feel it connecting with that part of me that is capable of doing that, because my belief is we're all capable of all of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's what I suppose it's awareness, like you're saying, it's that awareness of what your reaction is to how you're going to walk through your own day and react to what is coming at you. And so like you said, with the love melts that. Now I guess my question is, as I'm watching these these events unfold, is there a portion of the population that would be untouched by love?
My personal belief is no, but I mean, I can only speak from my own experience. So, for me, reality is what I actually see. Stories that we watch, movies that we watch, and if we imagine ourselves in those movies, it's going to spark our emotions, right? And in our brain, it's no different than it happening. So for me to sit and watch the news, it would be making myself watch a movie that I'm then agreeing to that is in my reality, and therefore my mind and my whole body is responding to it in that way. So
Very much.
so I don't watch the news. I will touch in on articles and things like that to be up to date, kind of on what's going on in people's lives. And then I look to my own life and say, okay, what's my energetic bubble and who am I interacting with? And then how can I, if somebody comes into my bubble that has that situation, how do I hold myself with that love energy so that hopefully it has an effect on them? Or if I'm in that love energy and they're not, absolutely not, they're not going to come in my bubble. So it's that kind of energetic. So I don't want to be naive to what's happening, and I have compassion and I send positive energy that way, only positive energy. Because if I watch the news and I watch media and I get that anger and that hate, I'm sending that anger and hate into that situation. It's not doing them any good. If I can sit with it and say, okay, and I can transmute it and say, I'm capable of this. What part of me is capable of this? Let me hold that part. Let me love it. Let me forgive it. Let me let it go and let me have compassion for it like it was my own child. And then I can send that love into that situation, then I do that. But if I stay in that hate and that anger and I want to fight, then I'm contributing to that.
We're partaking in it then at that point, aren't we?
Yes, we're
It's as
adding.
if we were there participating.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I
I mean, that's
really,
the way I hold it. Other people
wow.
don't agree with me, but that's the way I hold it. Yeah.
Well, if we are of the understanding that everything is energy and we're all intertwined in that energy, then to me it makes sense that when we're pulled in from an emotion, and I think we understand that emotion is energy in motion, right? It's our energy that now has been put into motion. So if your emotions are being triggered, poked at, all of those things when you're watching that, it's almost like you said, as if your body and your mind are actually there.
Hmm.
Then when
Teleport
you're
there.
sending what, if whether you're standing in solidarity with them and you
Mm.
think it's wonderful what they're doing, or you're completely upset and angry about what they're doing, either way you're still creating an emotional response to it and you're feeding it. And
Yes.
so I get that, and I really needed to hear that. And even though I probably knew that, and I've practiced it many times over the last years of my own awakening, I still find myself at times caught up in the collective wave of what's taking place, the events that are taking place right now. And
Hmm.
I think, like you said, it's my accountability and my responsibility to, yes, I understand, to be aware of what's taking place. Like you said, I don't want to be my head in the sand and not think that anything is going on. But at the same time, how am I feeding it?
Yes. I only want to be aware of those things at which I can make a positive action.
Okay.
If that makes sense? And when
Yes.
I feel like I can't, like if it's a topic that I feel like, oh man, I'm not ready to make a positive contribution to this, then I'll kind of like wade into it slowly, and sit with it within myself and meditate on it and try to get the different angles of it before I dive straight in. I mean, there's so many topics out there like child abuse and the whole everything else that we've talked about before that is going on the world stage. And for a long time, you go into this anger, then you go into this depression. It's like a grief cycle, right? And until you can get to the other side of it for yourself, whatever tools, whatever process you use to do that, you're only contributing that harsh energy that right now the universe, I don't know if it's always been like this, but I can speak of my experience right now. It comes right back at you really fast. And so it's like if you project it out, something, it might not be about that particular topic, but something else in your life's going to bite you in the butt, you know and so it's like if you project love, then you've got that softening and that love that's going to catch you in different situations. So I've just seen it so many times in my life. It's like I don't want to do that anymore, and I'm not perfect at it. There are times when you get your heartstrings, like, or you get anger sparked or your ego rises up. But for me, it's that time when you go back and go, what happened there? What why did that spark that in me? What part of that triggered something in me, so that, we talk about triggering like it's a bad thing, but actually, if we take it into meditation, it's not a bad thing because it teaches us so very much. And so you can sit there and say, why was I triggered? Was that true? Was that completely true? Did I absolutely know that that was the case? Or did my perspective change that? And maybe there could be another explanation for what that person said or how that came across. And the more I did that, the more I realized it was my own internal things that were causing me to see it the way I was seeing it. So it's just that it's a walking, we've heard earth school. I mean, this is an earth school. It truly is. And the more we try to push these things away, the more we're not learning, and the more we just like make ourselves smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Um, because you're not like processing things through and then contributing your energy to the universe, and then the universe brings that energy back, and then you're contributing. I want to be in that expansive energy, and the other protection, fighting and stuff like that feels very constrictive. And so if I put that out, then it's going to come back to me in that way, and I'm going to feel like I'm more constricted and more constricted and more in danger and more in danger, and that's not the life I want to live. Yeah.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, I think it reminds me, Gina, of the philosophy around meditation, of pulling back and being more the witness to
Yes.
what's occurring, and to understand your position in the witnessing, because there, to me, there's a difference, and I struggle with this at times, the difference between being a witness to things
Mm.
and detaching from things, because I find for me, when I detach, I tend to then constrict, because it's almost like a defense mechanism, right? It's like I've got to detach, and pull back because I don't agree with this, and then all of a sudden I'm in a place of judging and ego and restriction. And instead, when I and I've been on both sides of this,
Mhm.
when I'm able to be the witness to it and still remain, I suppose the word is neutral,
Mhm.
then I'm able to judge it less. And I find when I'm not judging, I'm back in my heart.
Yes.
Even if I don't, even if philosophically I don't agree with maybe what I'm seeing or how I'm feeling about a particular event that's occurring, when I'm not judging it, I then find myself being able to move more to the love scale.
Mhm. Which is more, if you think about from a feminine energy perspective, as a mother, you don't look at your two children fighting and think, I hate this one and I love this one. You're trying to see both angles and trying to say, okay, what's the best outcome for the both of you? Right. So that's more that kind of loving, holding space for, hearing, letting things vent, but not like taking sides on an issue necessarily, and not fueling one at the expense of the other, or hating one and loving the other. It's like we're all brothers and sisters, we're all connected, we're all part of the same energetic family. So it's how do we hold each other like that and say, okay, what can I contribute to this that's going to make it the best for all involved, the best for both.
Do
And
you think that there's a place where we can rest in that doesn't look like detachment or apathy, where we're not caring about a particular set of circumstances, but instead, and I think this is probably more of a Buddhist philosophy, correct me if I'm wrong, but where we're able to allow it to flow through us, like through our filters and our cells, and it doesn't become a part of us, but it's not a place of apathy.
yeah,
And I find that that's probably one of my life mastery lessons that I find coming up over and over, because I think my personality or my traits tend to want to be more, dual, put it in the category of that's good, nope, that's bad.
hmm,
And instead finding myself in a place of not being apathetic to it or not caring towards it and not judging it, but being more in a place of letting whatever that is that's occurring flow through me, and maybe at the end of it finding a place of transmuting it,
transmuting, it's
right?
really
That's
like,
that alchemy.
yes, that's really the aspiration. And that only happens in the heart, in my thought. It only happens when you can sit there and hold both of the beings in a loving place and be able to have compassion, and let it transmute and flip. And detachment to me is different. So detachment to me is not apathy necessarily. Detachment to me means I'm not rooting for one or the other to win.
Okay.
You know,
I like
so,
that definition far better than it being apathetic.
yeah. So that's when I think of
Okay.
detachment. I'm just thinking of I'm not cheering for this one and against this one. It's kind of like I'm sitting back going, okay, well, let me see if I can see both angles. Let me kind of feel into the energetics. Let me look at the higher good of all of the beings that are involved to figure out how do we get best through this. And it not necessarily is going to be comfortable for everybody involved, but for the highest good of all, we get through this, versus me feeling emotionally like I'm going to be all better and this is going to be so great if this one wins, and I'm going to be in terror and torment if this one wins. That to me is where you're totally attached to the outcome, where you can just sit back
Wow.
and go,
Okay.
I if this one, I'm going to be okay. I trust the universe. I trust my heart. I trust that either wins. I just want to see if I can contribute some positive energy to this in some way, for the good of all of us. That to me is detachment. Does that make
Okay. Yes. Yes, I do. And over the last, well, since probably about 2014, so about 6 years, I've heard often, I call it the God voice.
Mhm,
And it almost comes with a little bit of humor in it. And it asks me often, do you trust me?
mhm.
Do you trust me? Higher self, whatever, again, whatever language we want to put around that voice. But Gina, I cannot tell you, and I hear it in the most unusual circumstances at times, but it always brings me back. Because again, there is a little bit of levity in that voice when I hear it
Mhm.
in my mind, and it's got a certain sound to it. But it brings me right back into that place of, oh my gosh, I'm starting to swing to just what you were talking about, to that place of, well, this is the only outcome that can occur for my survival or for my well-being or whatever it may be. And when I hear that voice, it puts me back into a, how do I describe it? A place of, well, I guess a place of absolute and total trust that no matter what the outcome is, at the end of the day, there is no losing.
Right.
There's no losing at this earth school.
Mm-mm. No.
That's what it every time I hear it, it's that reminder that, Sherry, there is no losing. It's all it's all meant to be the way that it's unfolding.
Yep. And how we perceive it and how much we willingly take these things on and work with it will determine the ride. Is it going to be really bumpy, or is it
Woo!
going to be more smooth, or, that determines the ride for us. But the process that we came here to do, we're going to do it. We're going to learn. We're not going to fail. We're not going to get kicked out or whatever. We're going to do the process that we came here to do. But how smooth do you want it to be, and how bumpy? I mean, some people like bumpy. That's okay. That's not me. I don't want them.
Well, I'd say I've been in both arenas, right? Like sometimes that drama and that bumpiness, it keeps things alive and exciting. And believe me, I can relate to that
Yes.
for sure. But then I've had the absolute blessing or the foresight of knowing what it is to be on the other side of that as well. I know what that feels like intrinsically in my cells to not be in the drama and the bumps. And I joke with some of my friends that, I much prefer the peace bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I shared with you a few conversations ago that uh that when I finally understood where the guidance is and what that guidance feels like when you're being guided to a particular, situation, person, whatever it may be, that compass is peace. And I never understood that before. But that's when you're on path, so to speak, is when that sensation of peace is with you and that we don't have to fight it. I always think about that nursery rhyme, that we sang to our children, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is. but a dream.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
think of that I got the chills on my legs, but I think of that when I'm in that space of my peace bubble, that, oh my gosh, it's just a gentle flow downstream, that it doesn't have to be the swimming upstream every day, Sherry. We can put that aside.
Mhm. But like
So,
you said, there's sometimes where, we might want to watch a scary movie.
yep.
We might want to watch a
Feel
love
alive.
story,
Let's
or
face
we
it, you
might want
feel
to,
alive.
yeah. So, I mean, there's times where people, and I believe that we're always on our path. It's just, we take these little detours that, you know, and when we scare ourselves, and then we
I
decide,
call
oh,
it the zigs and the zags, right?
yeah,
Sometimes we're zigging, sometimes we're zagging, and sometimes we're following that true north point.
right.
Um,
Yeah,
and it's, again, there's no failure at any of it. If you zig and you zag your whole life, you're still going to get there.
right.
And I think right now, what I'm finding, I don't know about you, but I'm finding if I'll put a movie on, which I do periodically, I can't get through it anymore. I used to be able to sit and watch endless movies for hours. I can't get through a full movie right now because I almost feel like what's going on in the collective out there is more of a movie that I've ever seen in my whole entire life ever, all combined in one.
Much more interesting. Yeah,
Who needs a movie?
we try to watch shows and movies, and it's like we get into it, it's like, this is so like simple and not interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Very much. Yeah, it's very much so.
From that, Gina, from that collective standpoint, and I know that, we appear to be, from my perspective, ramping up.
Mhm.
Like we're ramping up to somewhere.
Precipice, a pinnacle.
To,
Yeah.
exactly, to some pinnacle.
Mhm.
Um, with this heightening that we're probably all collectively and personally experiencing right now. Um, and I know that you and I talk about Q. Is it that God wins, and what does that look like? What does it look like that God wins?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. Because each of us have that in us, right? So we're each a shard of God.
Yeah.
So when you think sovereignty and choice and what you want your life to be like, we each can choose what we want to play out. So, how it would be a very boring world, in my opinion, if everybody was all the same and everybody was going to do all the same. And we have no, I mean, think about the adventurers that go out just to make it difficult on themselves when they don't have to in order to explore life. So, I don't know. It's a good question to think about. Is it everything that's smooth sailing, or is it that if you wanted to go out, you go out and you venture these things, but you do it with parties that are agreeable to it. And in some ways, that's what's happening, right?
Well, it reminds me of, I remember as a little girl up in my bathroom. We had one bathroom in our house growing up, and I remember there was a mirror, and then there was a medicine cabinet that opened that had a mirror as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why I discovered this or how, but I remember sitting on the countertop as a little girl, and if you opened the mirror just right, the medicine cabinet mirror just right, and you looked into the mirror in a certain position, you literally could see thousands of little mirrors open,
Yes.
like back, right? Like fractally back, 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 back. It fascinated me for quite some time, and I would do it quite often. I would go sit on the counter and look into that. And when I think about what we're all participating in right now, that's the vision I get of this very fractal little slices
Mm-hmm.
of time frames, right? Like almost like you used to see the old fashioned cartoons made, and they would be on all these little tiny slivers of a screen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, are we all jumping into these different timelines at different times, and to experience a different experience?
Mm-hmm.
And is it speeding up? Because I almost feel as if those timelines are, like you kind of said earlier, with that boomerang effect, right? Where what we put out comes back very quickly now, whereas before it might have taken months or years to swing back around. And I know a lot of people maybe call that karma, different language put on that effect. But is that what we're witnessing right now? Is that we're able to almost like time travel or time jump into these different fractal universes and participate for a little bit and then jump back out.
Hmm.
Does
Yeah,
that resonate with you?
it does. It's interesting because it's like what came up as you said that was like we have a menu of experiences. Like if you think of Tim's talked and I've talked on the channel about amusement parks, in some of the earlier videos we had. So it's like
Yes.
we have this whole menu of rides, these whole menu of experiences that we can have. And we are choosing which ones to go into. Now, our media is pushing certain ones
Yes.
for us to go into. And we can say, okay, yeah, we'll follow you into that. Or we can say, no, I'm not going to follow that one. I'm going to do this one. So we have people who are, deep dive in what's happening, here in the country. We have the pandemic thing but we also have people who are deep diving into creating sustainable communities, and that's all they're absorbed with. So that's their world right now. And then you have some that are adventuring, to Antarctica and other places, and that's their world now. So it's like, then you have the indigenous tribes that aren't involved in any of this, and that's their world. So I think even within what's there, it's like we have this whole menu of options of what we want our world to be like and what experiences we want to have. And the TV and the computer internet screens with the media has given them kind of like a channel to attract more people into that ride. And I feel like a lot more people are saying, I don't want that ride. I'm going to do my own ride. I'm going to do something different. Now the media will purport it to be like everybody is doing it. It's terrible in that city and everybody's doing it. And yet I drive around the city, I'm going like, I don't see terror, So it's like there's a certain show that they're
Yes.
selling, and some people are buying it. And I'm not saying that there's not, I don't want people to think I don't think there's some issues behind it, but I think they sensationalize certain things. And so to get that energy in there, it's going to make that ride more interesting. It's going to make that ride more intense. The more energy that gets flown into that versus saying, I don't choose that ride. Let me choose this ride that looks more interesting to me, and let me put my energy there. And you're not putting energy into this other thing. So I think some ways it's already happening. And whether you call it timelines or whether you call it realities or whether it's different dimensions or, there's different ways of holding it. But I think it's already here. I think we're already,
When do you, from your perspective, Gina, when do you think we hopped on board this one collectively? When do you think that change occurred? And not that it's just, I'm just curious.
yeah, I think honestly, I feel like this has been happening for a long time. I think we hear about 2012 and, all
Yes.
of that. And I think largely that was probably true. It's just that we were so locked into our patterns and our way of being that we didn't see a different way. It's like taking us time to come off the drug, to where we can start to feel the freedom and the sovereignty and the choice to say, yeah, okay, yeah, I see this, so in some ways it's been around for a while. Was it exactly at 2012? I don't know, but we had to convince ourselves that we had the power to do it. But I can tell you a lot of things were freed up, in my thought and opinion, after, I think, as a collective, we showed a certain energetic that we were not willing to play with anymore when we had the last election.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I think that was
Wow.
a huge show that we're not playing that game anymore. And since then, I think there's been a lot of trying to get us back on that track. And people are going, it just doesn't have the same sting. Things don't last as long. Things die off quickly. We've switched so quickly from, COVID, everybody staying in, staying safe, to protest and get out. And there's so many different messaging, and that's just the latest ones over the last several years that have tried to hook us back into that. And we're going like, there's a large enough population going, nope, not going to do it.
Boy, what an amazing time to be on this ride, right? Like
Absolutely.
it is, I suppose, in many ways. Now, I've studied a little bit of the yugas, and I think we talked about that one of the conversations you and I had about the 25,000 year
Oh yeah.
yugas that um, I don't want to butcher this, but I know I don't know if it's Buddhist, or I don't think it's Buddhist. It's definitely, well, I learned about it when I was at that ashram for Paramahansa Yogananda's ashram, is where I first learned about the yugas, and that we are coming out of the Kali Yuga, right? Or the what they call the Iron Ages or the Dark Ages, and we're coming up into, I believe, Dwarapa. And so there is an ascension that's occurring. Now, when you get to the top Yuga, they call that the golden age, right? And we've been there before as a world. We've been and it's called Satya, or the age of truth.
Mhm.
And we're headed there, but we're about 50,000 years away from that top Yuga, 50,000 years from now, roughly. But it makes so much sense to me when you hear these terms like way showers or the light bearers, and that collective energy of those of us that are on this ride of waking up, that we're kind of I always visualize like we're taking the torch, and we're going to carry it for however long we're here on the planet, and then we're going to pass it back to the people that will take it even further, right? And in that ascension process.
Yeah.
I don't even know why I got off on that, but it's so fascinating to me to think about the shortness of our lives that we're here, and then the possibility, and of course I guess nobody knows for sure, but the possibility that we get to re-enter back in, at a different timeline. But like you, I almost feel like, and I got the chills again, that the timelines, and I think that's that thinning of the veils
Mhm.
between the worlds, right? That we're getting to experience that. And I think you said that last time we talked, that we're not having to die.
Mhm.
And I loved how you said that. And I've thought about it so many times, Gina, how we're not having to die in this lifetime to experience that.
Right. To experience that whole life review and coming out and rebirthing in a different way. I mean, that's happening while we're awake, which, in prior discussions in the manifesting manifesto that has been coming through Tim and we've been talking about, it says without the comfort of the deathbed is what came through.
Wow.
And when you think about that, you think, oh, comfort of a deathbed. But when you try to release who you used to be and go into who you are new while you're living, that is very hard to do. I mean, it takes a lot of courage, because when you go through the death cycle, you die and everybody says goodbye to who you were, you included. And then when you come back in, you're fresh and new. So when the concept of the comfort of the deathbed is, we are changing, we are transitioning. We came here during this time to experience then this transition. Anybody that's incarnated right now is here during this time to experience this transition awake. It's like saying, I want to do open heart surgery awake. Don't put me to
Away.
sleep. I want to see it all. And yes, it can be scary at times. It can be painful at times, but you get to see it. So I also, what came up when you were talking about the yugas is, during that time before we get to the golden age and we're on our path to truth, right? There's a lot of discernment in that time period. And
Woo!
as things are opening up, we have to learn to discern, what is truth, what is not truth, and what is truth for you. And truth for you may be different than truth for me. And, those kind of things. So it's kind of that shaping of that is being able to move out of the, I'm going to be told what to believe, to I'm going to decide what to believe, into that.
Do you think that what happens because of this ascension is that, it's just dawned on me when you said that what we're actually, and I'm gonna have to plug my phone in here in a sec, but what we're actually doing is we are, oh my gosh, I got such a visual when you said the shaving away, that we are, as the destruction of the old us is occurring, and we're shedding that, and you and I both, because we've both gone through divorce, I would say that's a pretty big shift, right? And some are willing to accept us at that place, and others will never accept us as the new person that we are after that event occurred. Do you think that what we're doing as we're ascending is, because the veils are thinning, we're more in touch with what truth is, and so we don't even have to come back and play this game of forgetting. We don't
Right.
have to come back and forget. We just come back, and we know. There's just a knowing.
Right. That, oh shoot. We're paused. I don't know if it's you or me, but can you hear me?
Yes, you just froze for a little brief
Yeah.
sec.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree. There's and the question has come up is why do we only live this short life that we did? I mean, you look at some of the Medusa and some of the biblical times in the life and the ancient Egypt times and stuff, and they lived, long
Eight,
lives.
900 years,
Yeah.
according to some of
And
the Bible stories.
that's just the ones we know about, right?
Yep.
So it could have been much longer. So for me, I'm just curious if it's actually going to be short lives like we've had. I mean, I can tell you as I started to awaken and go through this, I feel younger now than I did 15 years ago.
Me too.
All the way over me. I just do not feel what my chronological age, what I
Yes.
would expect my chronological age to make me feel. So, I'm wondering, what does lifespan do during that window too?
Oh, I didn't even. Okay.
Yeah. Because we've agreed, right? We've agreed to that lifespan.
I've joked so many times with friends, especially in the last, well, since I met you, really in that kind of time frame of about the year 2010.
Mhm.
I've joked that I feel like I'm reversing the aging process, and I don't mean that from a place of ego. It's like I feel like I'm reversing the aging process.
Mhm. Yeah, it's very interesting to experience. And people that I know from a long time ago, they look at me and go, "Wow," it's not, it, and it's nothing I'm doing. I mean, I've cleaned up my diet, and you can excuse all and say, "Well, I've cleaned up my diet and I do filter my water and stuff like that." But it's beyond that, because to me, your spirit, your energy radiates out through you. So, it makes a difference. And so I'm just curious. I sit with the curiosity. So I don't know what these years here look like compared to these years that we've heard about and experienced ourselves.
Coming out of the dark ages, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Well, and I don't even know about dark ages because I think the dark ages we were told about were maybe not dark. If you,
Interesting.
you know, they called them dark ages, but it could have been a period of enlightenment that occurred, that because we were to be kept in a certain paradigm,
Yes.
they were dark ages. But anyway, I just try to watch words because I don't want people to like assign
Associate
things,
it with, yeah.
yeah, throw things out with something else that's there. But yes, I'm curious as we go into this awakening phase, and when we get into that 50,000 years, does that mean that's the last one to wake up in that 50,000 years, or is that the first one? Like, do we all enter the Kali or the yugas together, or is that just when the last being enters? Is that at that period? So how do we know how many people are scattered and how many people are already maybe in the golden age energy?
Ooh. Oh my gosh, because we all come in and out at different times. I get what you're saying. So somebody could have come in co- different timing than we did on that yuga wheel,
Hmm.
and so they're already living. Whoa, my mind just got blown.
Yeah, because we see it as a total, but we're not. We know right now we're across a spectrum, right? Uh,
Absolutely.
So at what part is it the individual, being going around that wheel, or is it
The
every
collect
being going around the wheel? I don't.
right.
Yeah.
Well, don't you oftentimes though feel that even though, yuga or no yuga, just where we are right now collectively, and I guess it goes back to what we were talking about before, that am I participating in the collective tone of what's going on in the world, or have I risen on my yuga wheel,
Hmm.
right? And I'm able to sustain that, and I think that's where I'm not going to use the word struggle because it doesn't feel like that, but that's the lessons or the mastery that's coming in for me is more and more, how do I sustain that elevated, I don't know, elevated nervous system, elevated emotions, elevated mental state? How do I sustain that where I'm not then dropping back down more and more into the collective pond? I'm able, and you took it that one step further where, yeah, you're able to sustain that place, but then you're also then sending it out,
Yeah.
right? You're not just keeping it. So then I think we start to switch more to that place of service to self or service to others. And they say that where we're headed with all of this ascension is more service to others.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. And you may have days where you drop back, and that's, we say it's good, bad, right, and wrong. I don't know. Maybe you wanted that experience. Maybe there's another dimension of your personality and your experience that you wouldn't get by staying up here. You
Yeah.
needed to go down here to really make it apparent. So then you could, I don't know if it's a constant forward movement or we have some forward and back and it's to grow us along the way. I don't know. But I know for me personally, there are days where I feel really like all there and love coming out of me and anything that comes in my field, and then there are days where I'm like, yeah, I'm not feeling that high vibe, but I know that about myself, so I watch what I engage in because I don't want, from the service to others perspective, I don't want to radiate out that type of energy. So I'll tend to go in and try to figure out what is going on there and where is this and what lesson does it have. And then when I can get back up to that feeling where I can radiate out the love and the higher vibe energy, then that's when I'm going to probably engage with more the other stuff and try to send out the energies to it. Where a lot of people, I think, when they're high vibe, they don't want to look at the negative stuff,
Yes.
they'll kind of go like, oh, I don't want to be knocked off. Well, you're just saying your high vibe's not very strong, you know? So it's like, no, that's when I'm feeling in that space is when I want to kind of observe some of that. So then I can send out those high vibes. I don't want to do it when I'm in my low space.
Well, and I'm even finding, Gina, and probably more so than ever in this year, 2020, that I go in and out of those spaces hourly sometimes,
Mhm.
right? Like it's where before I would find it would be days that I would be in one or the other, and now I can find it can be in an hour. So there's a quickening to it.
Yes. Yes.
And I don't know if it's coming from then me being able to recognize, okay, I dropped back in, I pulled out a little nugget from my downtime or whatever we want to call that. I was able to pull out a little nugget or a splinter or whatever and recognize that. And now I'm ready to go. I'm ready to ascend again. And I find myself, I guess my pendulum is swinging more often, but not as wildly, right?
Mhm.
It's more of I'm back and I'm forth between these kind of dimensions of feeling, lower vibration and then feeling my frequency rise. There's a quickening.
Yeah.
Does that resonate with you, that quickening?
It does. And yeah, you don't get stuck. I used to say I'm going
Yes.
down that mountain again, and it would last for days, and it's like
Yes.
I can cycle around that mountain pretty quickly. It might not be a whole day, but if it's something huge that I'm trying to transmute, it might last a day. I don't, it just varies. So, but yeah, it normally, because of the tool set and because of the muscle memory of being able to hold it with different energies, um, that's where it does seem to process out quicker. But that means that you have to have your ego in check, because anytime the ego gets engaged, that's when it hangs on longer. That ego triggers you, and that's when it's really hard to let it go for a long period of time. So when I find that I'm in it for longer than a few minutes even, then my ego's gotten triggered somewhere there that's hanging on to it, or else I should be able to just kind of, okay, let it go.
Well, and I know at the very beginning of our conversation before you were recording that you brought up that when we were talking about feminine and masculine, that the universe right now is supporting this, I guess, this quickening
Mhm.
for us. And I'm guessing it's happening at a DNA level where the strands are actually, and I've heard mixed things, but they're like becoming more crystallized.
Mhm.
So do you think that that's also why we're able to experience so much just in a given 24 hours, because the universal energies are also supporting that in
Yeah.
us
Yeah, I
humans?
think so. Yeah, our junk DNA is all
Yes.
getting repaired, so we can experience different things. Yeah, I think that largely has a effect on it too. Plus,
I had a little download the other day while out for a walk before my toe incident. And oftentimes I say that those are my conversations with God when I'm out walking,
Mhm.
and probably because I'm disconnected from, the internet, the computer, the phone, the everything. And what came to me around the junk DNA And I think because you and I had sparked that conversation the last time we talked, and you'd brought that term up, and of course I'd heard it before, but never really given it much thought. But I was out for my walk, and the junk DNA, what I was downloaded, or the vision I got, was that it's a space in between, and in that space in between that we think there's nothing is everything.
Hmm. Wow.
That's where our God particle, or that you called it the shard,
Hmm.
that's where the God particle resides in
Hmm.
in us.
Nice. I like that. That resonates. That feels good. Yeah.
And we've been taught by modern science that it's not needed. We don't, what's the junk? It's just throwaway. Nobody even needs it. But in reality, in the space where nothing exists is everything.
Yeah, and think about this to that. What came in when you said that was, you know how we use DNA testing to figure out which family you belong to? What about all of that God particle DNA that's in there? It's who we are. I mean, that's our family, familial connection.
That is the forgetting, right? The
Mhm.
forgetting that we come in with when we're birthed onto this earth ship, is that we forget that spirit connection with creator. And society, much of society, supports that
Mhm.
forgetting, right?
Yep.
Daily, hourly. And I guess it's up to each of us, and that's the beauty of timing. For each of us individually, our uniqueness is when we begin to remember again.
Hmm.
Do you remember when you remembered? Do you remember your first rememberings?
Oh, my first
Or did
remember.
you ever forget? Maybe you never forgot. I forgot.
Yeah, that's interesting because, as a child, I can remember certain things, and as what made me think of is as a child when we see apparitions and we see things, energies and things like that, but we think it's imaginary. So we convince ourselves that things are imaginary. I think that personally I came in with a lot more than I now think I did. But for because of society and other things, I talked myself out of a lot of things, you know and I find it exciting right now because the children that are being born now and in the last, let's say, 5-10 years, they're coming into much more of a situation where they're going to be encouraged to remember. So it's like, did we forget coming in, or did we condition ourselves to like turn that off once we were here?
I
So
would say more the latter. Makes resonates with me more. I suppose an infant is the closest to God at that moment when they're born than we ever are while we're living, right? Like that's,
mhm,
you've just left your spirit world behind and you're now incarnating in matter.
mhm,
And so yeah, that resonates with me more than the forgetting. And then society, because adults have all forgotten, or at least back then they did when you and I were born. We're conditioned to forget unless you happen to be born into a family that made a conscientious effort over their lifetime to not forget, because back then I think the energies were so much denser that forgetting was so much easier.
yeah, it was safer, for you.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Because you would have otherwise probably been ostracized in many circumstances, school and friends circles, and just where we find ourselves as humans. And so yeah, that really resonates with me to think about that. And that the kids that are being born in now, because of the ascension that's occurred collectively, it's almost as if just through osmosis of being born now, they will be supported in continuing their remembering,
Right. Well, and that's another aspect of the
knowing.
feminine, I think, that has the power so much that the feminine has, is because mothers have a large impact on that for the child, right? So if a mother feels like they've got to teach this child to be tough and to, do these things and fight and do, in order to stay alive, then that mother's going to teach them thinking they're doing things that are going to help that being stay alive through adulthood. when actuality that perpetuates the energies that we don't want to have. So, some of it's going to be relearning. That's why inside of ourselves we've got to get comfortable when we're faced with a challenge, not to revert to that fight protection energy. But if we want to see more love and more collaboration and more unity, we got to start in our own world, which is our home, with our children and our spouse and so on, to transition that, or else those children are conditioned and programmed in a way, to live out in that environment. And we can say, well, the system has to change and the world has to change for us to feel safe raising our kids that way, or we can say we can raise our kids that way and then the system has to change. And
Yes.
I truly feel like you start, the organization is never a thing to change. It's all the individuals in that organization. So that where we can work in our sphere, in our communities, and whoever we impact with, to shine that light and raise the different way to do it, then that can maybe start to transition that bigger system. And then we have to catch ourselves when we go into those protection modes with our children, of saying, well, you've got to be able to do this and you've got to be able to do that, you'll never survive. Well, now you've stuck that in your child's brain and they're going to believe that. Just like, well, if you talk about imaginary people, they're going to think you're crazy, you know out of a desire to keep them safe, but it conditions them. So if we want to see a different world, we as mothers, have to start conditioning differently, and starting with ourselves and our voice.
Yes.
You know.
Well, like you said to me, I think the first time you and I talked, that yeah, we can all probably agree that there is a war raging around us right now in the world. The world, it's a worldwide war,
Mm-hmm.
but individually we're all going through that same war within each of us. And when in listening to you describe that, with the mother being that, that change maker, it's where it all begins. And my mom and I were having that conversation this morning, that really we can blame and say that, we need to do this and this and this with the government or society or whatever it may be, to get to the end of wherever we're headed with the change. But ultimately it's within each of us that change needs to take place. And if we're not supporting each other as we each make those changes,
Mm-hmm.
then, from, like you were saying, from a survival or a safety standpoint, we will revert, because we think that that's the only place that is safe. Gina, I'm gonna go grab my
Your
my
charger.
cord. Yeah, I'll be
Okay.
right back.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back in business. So
Okay.
can we tiptoe, or maybe do what is going on right now, and how we've, since you and I've talked to, well, I think it's been a little over a week, we're
Mm-hmm.
in a whole new narrative.
Yes.
Right? We're out of the virus narrative, although I see them trying to cycle back around. Now we're going to be cycling back around in the COVID narrative. But then we went into the race inequality and the death of a
Yeah.
man who I'm not even sure is gone, or any of that. Will you share with me what you're thinking around all of that?
Well, I kind of talked about it being the menu of things, right? So I think these are all possible storylines that they're trying to see what is going to get the attention. Um,
Okay.
and people initially, there's a burst of energy, but then it kind of starts to wane when storylines don't pan out. So in some cases, I think it's like I could look at it and say it's these storylines trying to hook different beings and see where they can get the collective moving. Okay. Or I can say it's those triggering mechanisms for us to learn things about ourselves.
I want to make sure that, hang on one sec. I want to make sure.
So I would have lost you anyway. Um, yeah. So, so I think it can be where it, it can either be, if it, again, it's how you hold it, right? So you can look at it and say it's the big bad people trying to trigger and move the collective in a certain direction. Or you can say it's all beautiful working together to trigger us so we can see these things within ourselves and transmute them. So it's whatever story that you choose to look at. on the world stage and how you want to orient to it.
Wow.
That's kind of the way I.
Okay. I've thought both. I have thought at times, and maybe I'm giving him too much credit. I don't know. But I've thought at times, I think that our president is completely 100% on board with what's going on because he knows
Mhm.
he's in some sense allowing this to occur because he knows this is going to be, it's almost like the red pills get larger, right? Like last year at some point we had the Epstein red pill that red pilled so many people that just knew in their soul that there's no way that that man committed suicide, and that woke a lot of people up. But I feel like we're ramping up the red pilling here, so at times I feel like he is on board with what's happening and he's going to allow this thing to play out. And then other times I think, oh my gosh, Q keeps telling us that the Patriots are in control, but I don't know,
Mhm.
because like you said, on the in the media, all they're showing is the squeaky wheel. I call it the squeaky wheel syndrome, right? It's the ones that are out there, that the small part that are getting, whatever they're getting, as far as the attention, but it's such a small majority, but they're making it appear, like you said earlier, like it's, the whole country.
Right.
So I get that, but I go between the two.
Yes. Yeah, because you can hold it either way. You can hold it in whichever way you want to hold it in, for your storyline that you want to go or how you want to learn. So if you want the one way, you can hold it that way. And neither is right or wrong, I don't think. It's just
Yeah.
your personal choice as to how you want to engage in life during this time. And so, yeah, I get, there's times where I want to go into the storyline. I want to see this, oh, good guys, bad guys, alliance, not, those kind of things. And let me see, and which side is, just like you're reading a book, a mystery novel. Or there's sometimes where I go, oh yeah, we're all doing this for each other to try to wake us up. So, I mean, I fluctuate. And for me, it's learning all the way around, because when we hear multidimensionality, to me, that's what that means. So you can look upon a situation and you can look upon it from all different dimensions, from being on the ground, the person, who's in the story. You can look at it from the protagonist, antagonist, whatever the story. You can look at it from a higher level perspective, from a collective perspective. And so as you sit and look at it yourself, you go, oh yeah, okay, I like that. I don't like that. This triggers me. Why does that trigger me? How do I know about me? So I think there's all different ways to hold it. So again, it's not getting too attached to any particular, and thinking this is the only one. I've got to convince everybody, that this is the right way to look at it, because it's who's right and who's wrong. It's each has their own journey, in my opinion.
Well, I guess with the more so, well, no, I shouldn't say that. I was going to say more with the virus than with what we're with the narrative that we're in right now. Um, but I don't think that's. I want to retract that. I think that what I find so fascinating is the split when you're able to pull back and look at it from a higher perspective. That those that think that the virus is, deadly, and they're in masks still, and they're still maybe quarantining or whatever that looks like for them. But then on the flip side of it, you've got those people that are thinking this was all made up, and you've got such a far split between the two trains of thought. And then I'm sure there's a lot of people somewhere in the middle. Same thing with what we're experiencing right now after the George Floyd incident. And both whether you're here or you're way over here, you are convinced that you're correct and the other side is lost, hopeless in their thinking. And I love when I'm able to pull back in that perspective, from a higher perspective, and look at it and think, oh my gosh, it's this the incident occurred, and yet it's being looked at through such different eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that fascinating,
Yeah.
just I guess from a, I don't know, a psychological standpoint.
Well, I actually posted a thing today on my Facebook page that a friend of mine, well, actually Jenny, that normally is on our channel, had posted, and it showed a mama cub with it was a lion, I think, with her pup, and she had grabbed it by the the neck. So its head was on this side, and she was carrying it. So if you looked at her from this way, you saw the pup's face, and you saw that she was lovingly carrying her animal. But if you saw it from this way and it said this is what was happening and this is what the media says is happening, it looks like the mama was eating the baby. So it's kind of like anytime that, whatever perspective that I have is based on what information I'm getting and how I'm reviewing it. So my advice, if you're asking me for advice, is constantly question everything. Like, there has to be more to the story than we're being told. There's got to be a different angle. And how do we know? I mean, we've seen all of these fake pictures and video come out in our mainstream news outlets that were false. They picked up old footage from somewhere else that didn't even apply to that and played it, or they had somebody standing in a water puddle acting like that the water was up that high and it wasn't. I mean, we've had so many lies come out that it should trigger us to say, oh yeah, wait a minute, are they really showing me what is really happening and all that happened there? Now, you can look at it and you can say, yes, that definitely happened, and maybe that incident, maybe whatever incident you're looking at did happen, but it's just the conditioning of questioning it for yourself and trying to think, is there another perspective, another way to look at it? you know um, the first reaction that you have is going to be something inside of you that is going to teach you the most. So whatever first
Mm.
initial reaction comes out, whatever it is, for, against, fight, not, is what's pervasive, at least for me in my experience, is what's pervasive in me that right now I need to look at. And pervasive can be small, it doesn't have to be huge, but
Right.
it surfaces what is the most powerful thing that if I looked at it right now would change something in my reality. So that initial reaction, but then take note of that, spend some time with that, but then question it, because there's so much information that comes out about these things long after the fact that doesn't get covered because of the emotion carrying the whole thing that happened forward. So yeah, it's just really fascinating. I'm an observer of human behavior anyway, so for me it's fascinating to just watch people's reaction and how they interact around things. That I've learned so much just by watching this show on TV, that I'm not having to personally be affected by physically. Um,
Partake in that way.
Right. But you can learn so much through it and choose, no, I don't want that piece anymore. And why, I mean, we had this one discussion. I was watching this lady talk about it. She said she had watched the video, for example, so many times. Well, every time she watched the video, she was replaying that in energetics. It's like she was reliving this scene over and over and over and over and over again. And it was like, to what end?
Right.
You're just traumatizing yourself over and over and over again. For, is it for your benefit, or is it for the benefit of trying to, steer a group of people toward a certain end? So question everything. I mean, everything. Everybody's biased from whatever angle they're, speaking. They're going to speak from the angle. I'm biased because I'm going to speak from the angle of where I'm centered, and it's going to be different than the angle you're centered. So it's going to be more reflective of where I am at, and you can decide, okay, yeah, I agree with that. That part resonates. That part I'm questioning. That part doesn't resonate, and I don't want that. And that's fully your prerogative. Every being's prerogative to do that with anything that's out there. But that's kind of my angle on it. It sounds kind of fluffy. It's hard to explain, but it's kind of yeah, they're all lessons for us. And
I find myself when I do plug in to whatever it may be, social media or, the news, whatever outlet it may be, I find myself right now more so than the virus right now with what's occurring, not believing anything. Literally, I don't believe I almost feel desensitized. And I've felt like this over the past few years when we would have mass shootings.
mhm.
I would feel desensitized from it almost. Like, I don't believe any narrative that they're putting out because I think that there's nothing true about it, especially when you see the same actors recycled through these different chaos,
Mm.
crises. So right now, what I find myself doing is discounting all of it. And I don't know what the lesson in that is. I don't know if the lesson is, get yourself off the social media and off the news and stop watching it, because you are right now so desensitized to it, and in such a place of just total non-belief of anything that they're putting out. Do I even need to know? I think that
Right.
sometimes, do I even need to know this information? Because I'm, if I'm in my space with my people and my home, I'm in my peace bubble.
Right.
It's not impacting my world. And so, do I even need to know this information right now? And yet, I find myself through my empathy. Um, so maybe I'm not desensitized in that way, but I find myself through my empathy feeling for these individuals who are being so impacted by this.
Mhm.
And then I think, I'm not impacted. So what does that mean about the world that I've manifested and that I've created? And what does that mean about the world that they're in?
Yeah.
Like that poor police officer who I guess went to defend his friend's business and was shot and killed on the sidewalk, and then was videotaped as he was dying. Nobody helping him.
Yeah.
I feel for that. I
Yeah.
feel for that, and that injustice that's occurring right now for so many people. And I almost feel that the role that they're playing in all of this is so courageous and so brave that they are willing to play that role for the rest of our benefit in some way.
Yeah. To learn, because that's symbolic, for watching the police officer that got killed. I mean, to reflect it on yourself and say, where have I done that? Where have I been the bystander? Where have I been the one to shoot? And I'm not talking a physical shoot, I'm talking about emotionally. Like, where have I done similar things emotionally to people, you know and where have I
And
also
watch the carnage, right? And then walked away.
and watch, yeah. So it kind of is a way of like holding a mirror to yourself and saying, when have I done those things? And some point you have to take breaks from it, and you don't want to whittle yourself down, so to speak. But normally, if you can sit with it, Byron Katie has a process called the work. It's at thework.com, and it gives you some questions to kind of work through some of these really emotional situations. And she's actually had some people talking about the incidences and how they work themselves through it with these questions, because it is, how do what is it? It may seem like, oh, I didn't shoot anybody, but in essence, if you project that, you basically are doing it in the energetics. Like, if I wish you were dead, well, you're energetically, you are doing that. Even though you might not pull the trigger, you want to stab the person or whatever, but energetically you're projecting that hate. So it gives you a way of working through some of that individually. So I think that the story that's going on, or stories, and whatever you tap into, are kind of the ones that have some lessons for you. And whatever is more interesting for you, don't make it wrong that you're not interested in it, because maybe there's nothing for you in that story.
There's nothing there.
Yeah. And so I also, what it brought up was us, when we talk about, if we heal ourselves, we heal the world. So we're all energetics, right? So if we're working on ourselves, even if I'm not reading that story, but I'm bringing up my love quotient and my unity and my acceptance, it's permeating that energy into that world, into that situation. It's a different way in a nuanced way of changing that world. Um, Without bringing me into the pit with them. Because I feel like, if somebody's, oh, it looks like one of us is frozen. I don't know, but it looks like, if somebody is in a pit, you know, is it helpful for me to get down in that pit with them? Or is it better for me to step on the bank and reach my hand down and try to help them out of the pit? And so when I feel like I'm getting in the pit with them, I try to back away and go, okay, where's my energy right now? Because it's not going to be helpful for them if I get into the pit with them, the pit of fear, the pit of anger, or whatever, helplessness, whatever those emotions are.
I think, Gina, that you and I, the last time we talked, oh, sorry about that. I got a call in. I think the last time that you and I talked, we had talked about what our perspective was on the behind the scenes of the virus, and perhaps, you know, the sex trafficking, human trafficking, children being rescued, or those kind of things brought to light. What is your feeling around what's occurring, right, this new narrative that we've all been in for the past week? And again, so amazing how quickly we shifted from lockdown, don't come out of your house, you're going to kill your grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
to come out and riot and burn businesses, and burn the small business owners, which were already being burned through the coronavirus, right? So we're still on that narrative of destroying small businesses in our country. But what do you think this is? It really just the titillating, let's collectively pull the whole world over here into a new narrative, or is there a backstory to, from your perspective, to what's going on with this one?
Yeah, that's hmm. There's so many. I have like five things came in when you were asking that question. Because there's so much going on around the police forces too, and the peacekeepers, of our country, which now are not, always seen as peacekeepers. Um, so, what is where are we going? It's kind of like if you set if you set a bunch of prisoners free all of a sudden, what are they going to do? How are they going to make their way in the world? In some ways, I think they're different ways to try to wake us up and try to get us to figure out what it is we want. So if we go, well, we don't want that for our community, we want our community to be this, then people can start to feel into that. Because if you go back to the law of attraction, for example, it's the comparison, right? So it's
Yes.
running into what you don't want that you then put into the vortex what you do want. So there's all of these things that we're going like, we don't want that. We don't want that. We don't want this. So we're building up this energetic of the vortex that we do want. And then when we can kind of turn our energy away from all of these things we don't want, these things that we do want can manifest themselves. So I don't know if it has to do with that to give us the contrast, really stark contrast so that it gives that energy boost into what we want, because we just get so fed up and tired with what we don't want, and then we go, okay, we've got to change, which often happens to a lot of us individually as we get to a point in our life that we hit rock bottom, and we just say, I mean, it happens for addicts, it happens for individual people, you get to the bottom and you just go, you know what, I can't do it anymore. Something's got to give. Well, I think collectively, that's kind of the path we're on. We're getting to
Yes.
the bottom of going, I don't want to do this anymore. Something's got to change. And it's hitting all of these groups and pockets that normally would kind of set themselves aside and think, okay, well, I can live isolated from that. I don't need to engage with that. So it's really hitting all the different strata of our society to say everybody collectively is going like, I don't want this anymore. This has got to go. Um, kind of force that dark night of the soul or that crucible for us collectively. But I think individually, we don't all need that, because individually, as we're working through those crucibles ourselves, we've already decided that's not what we want. We've already kind of started down that path of, I want something different. And we started working with those energies, and it's starting to come in now, for people as to what it is they really want and what their reality is like. Just like you're saying in your bubble, that's your peace bubble. You've created that bubble. If you were living in chaos, that bubble wouldn't be a peace bubble, and people, it wouldn't feel like that for you. That bubble, that place that you live and the people that you interact with are going to be energetically in resonance with you or be offering you something along your spiritual path. So the more that we individually kind of make it through those paths, the more those people coming into our bubble are going to resonate with that or be offering something to us, and we can decide how much we want to engage with the other, um, individually and collectively. But like I said, I only want to engage with it when I can send it positive energy to try to help the situation along or aid it in moving it forward. Um,
What's come up for me around this new crises that we're finding ourselves in collectively, um, and in understanding that Mr. Floyd's family, as attorney, wrote a letter to the UN asking the UN to come in and dismantle our police force, and just
Mhm.
different. You know, the agenda seems to be moving in a direction, at least what's being spoon fed to us by the media, is that we want to dismantle police, the police forces around the nation. We want to, take away any. We want to open up the prisons and let people out. We want to completely reform how we manage, I guess, criminal and negative behavior. And what it stokes in me personally is a threat to my safety and to my peace bubble.
Mhm.
I view it in that way. Now, do I think that that's going to happen? I vacillate. I go between the two. I think that there are enough people out, especially in our country, that feel so disillusioned with how things have been done for so long. And I'm not saying that the way they've been done is 100% correct. I think it's what we've had to work with, and we've built on it. And this is what we have as far as a police force and how we keep people hopefully safe and secure in their life, which doesn't always happen, as we know. So, do I think there needs to be reform? Probably. Do I think it's a dismantling of the system completely? I don't, because I think that is then a direct threat to those of us who have chosen to not walk a criminal path and to live our lives in a certain way with our moral compass. So I get lost in that narrative. I really do. I'm struggling with that right now.
Mm. Yeah, and I think each of us can have our, like, I could give you my perspective on it, you have your perspective, but each of us have to kind of come to that place ourselves in a way. But I tend to think there's not as many in the country that are on in favor of that as what the media proposes is in favor of that. So I think there's a large, I think it's a vocal minority. If you think about what's happened in our country, we've had a vocal minority over many centuries who have made big changes and swaths into what happens in our lives. What I'm hopeful of is the people that we have in various offices right now, the president included, has and not just here but around the world, the leaders around the world, that they're positioned in a way that it's not going to be. Uh,
Anarchy.
yes, yeah, I believe that if it had been different people in those positions, it clearly would have been terrifying for me. But whether it be because of the position I'm in now personally, or whether it be because of position people in positions around the world, I don't know. But I don't see that being the reality that we have. Um, Now, what it'll prompt us to do is face, how do we approach it? Do we approach it from that unbalanced masculine, let's fight, let's kill? Or do we approach it from, we want to be unity, we want communities? I mean, I've seen so many stories about communities coming together and standing up against the looters and standing up, for each other, and to really saying, not here, not in this area, not in this neighborhood. And so I've seen a fair number of stories about that, probably as many as I've seen the others, but the media is not going to cover those. So how this is calling into us as to how do we want to approach this. Are we going to fall into the harsh fight, kill, protect, fear angle? Are we going to be in this, why are you doing this to yourself? You're doing it to yourself by doing it to me. And how do we work this together, and how do we create unity? And I know that that's going to sound to some people a bit Pollyannish maybe, but how do we flip from the masculine to the feminine? It's going to sound soft, it's going to sound Pollyannish, it's going to sound, but it can be very hard, it can be very firm, like, I'm not going to play in that game. You see moms that go, no, I'm not going to do that. That's kind of like, no, we're not going to do that. That's not going to be here. That's not going to be how we operate. And I think that we've got to learn to play in that arena. And it's going to take courage. It's going to take a lot of courage, because our muscle memory and our history, our memories are from, what's been successful in the past.
Well, I find this situation that's occurring up in Seattle right now such a microcosm of exactly what you're talking about, because what we're witnessing when we tune in is that this area of Seattle has been taken by force, and it's being ruled by force and dominated by force, to the point where I've heard that they're asking the shop owners that live in this little section, they're basically extorting them that if they want to have their business open, they have to pay. And clearly there are weapons. They've barricaded themselves. There's all of this we'll put it this way, there's all this masculine energy that's occurring. And I've seen equal amounts of women. So I'm not talking males. I'm saying
It's the
there are women
distorted
there
masculine. Yeah.
who are like blowing my mind with their
Yes.
behavior. Okay. So that masculine energy 100% is what's holding that line right now there. And I've heard calls from both sides of the aisle politically for President Trump to send in the troops, right? To take them all out. Now, whether he does that or not, I don't know. But it when you were saying that, it brings to mind that, are we going to meet force with force? Because then we're just bringing in our masculine force to their masculine force, and now we've created nothing out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Imagine, I mean, and that's the distorted masculine too. But
Distorted masculine. Thank you. Yeah.
yeah, imagine that if, instead of going in with force, he goes in with buses and said, anybody that wants to leave, we'll relocate you to new housing. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like, it's like, what are the options? There's so, if you keep yourself from being in that kind of force against force, and you say, what are the other options? Well, if they want to play like that, we just, we're not going to play. We're going to withdraw our energy. We're going to, withdraw. I'm not saying that's what he'll do, but I'm saying, imagine if instead of going in and, killing them all, or, like pushing them down, or, whatever. I'm not saying that's what the troops would do, but I'm just saying, instead of going in with that like force, going in with a peacekeeping mission to contain, protect, and, you know, transition, which is a very different energy than put down.
Dominate, right?
Yeah.
That domination,
Yeah.
which what would occur. And that's the narrative that would then be played out, that we went in as the military or whoever went in and dominated these whatever you want to call them, anarchists. And then that would be the narrative. And when you were saying that, I thought, oh my gosh, what if we just stopped giving them airtime?
Right.
And had no way to get their message out? And who would they even be getting it out to? Nobody would even know.
And that's why I keep saying that the media is the enemy of the people.
Absolutely. And I also have heard, and I've seen him do this several times now, tweet the silent majority. So that goes back to what you were saying about, I think there are more of us than there are of the squeaky wheel that's right now getting the narrative on the media. They're getting the airtime.
And if you notice some of the stuff too that's coming out about how peaceful it's been in those areas where there has been National Guard. So it's not been deaths and fighting and lots of turmoil. It's been stillness. And so that's all that kind of calming, that kind of protection energy. That's somewhat the masculine or the feminine energies being portrayed, and delivered. And, yes, if you're going to be distorted masculine, you just go in there, roll in there, take them down. That's not what's happening. And that's what the media is trying to goad, and trying to say is happening, but it's not happening. So from the higher, from the organized perspective. So I'm hopeful. I'm curious to see what happens in that situation, because it would be like, okay, you meet a bully you meet a bully in the same arena as a bully, they're going to fight you, and they're going to, or you meet a bully with something else, it's going to knock them off center. It's like, oh, I expected you to fight back and you're not fighting back. It's going to be interesting, how it plays out. So I think we're seeing different avenues of that, and every single time lately, and this is where I say the universe is rewarding the good behavior. Every single time it seems that there's a move to try to push the other agenda, it smacks them right in the face. I mean, they've seen it. We saw some, supposedly some kneeling that was had certain garments around their neck saying, that was all in support of this. And it totally insulted, completely insulted a large swath of the community that they were supposedly being in solidarity with. So it's like it's smacking them in the face left and right. So the energies are not going to, I just feel strongly the energies are not going to reward that kind of behavior. Um, and as long as we can all stay balanced and nobody snaps, to flip over the other way, I think we can see ourselves go through this. And that's where, I feel like we've already won in some cases. We're just kind of seeing it come through. Yeah.
I don't know why I thought of this, but what if we were to craft some sort of a letter to, I don't know, to our president or just somebody, and say just what you said in handling of this? Or do you think he's there? Do you think our president's there to handle it in this way? I mean, I haven't seen evidence to the other.
Right.
I've seen evidence that he is being guided by the same force that you're talking about. Do you feel that?
I do feel that. And I feel like it's not just him, but I think there's a collection of people around him. Because as you said, we all have these, you know, I mean, he's human. Everybody's human. We all have these periods where we go into the, oh, this is a really crappy day, kind of thing. So I think it takes a community. And I fully believe there's a community that's, and we're lending our energies to it, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's not just a collection of people in Washington. It's a community around the world that's lending our energy to, yes, this is the right way, this is the right way, this is where we want it to go. And he's got a difficult position right now, but I feel comfortable where we are. I mean, it's weird to say, but it's I think we're going to come through this. I think everything that they try is going to just smack them in the face every single time. We saw it
I
with
love
the virus. We've seen it with this. I mean, we've seen it. It people are going like, wait, what? That doesn't make sense. You just overstepped and it made it look ridiculous. So,
Do you think between now and election this will ramp up?
uh, well, I don't know. Part of me says it could, but then I don't want that reality. So I could say, yes, it could ramp up, or if the energy shift quick enough, it doesn't have to.
It doesn't have to.
It depends on us individually and collectively as a collection of energy beings as to does it have to.
I read the other day that we're all Q,
Hmm.
right? That we're all Q. And
Hmm.
I thought that's a very profound statement, because we're all lending ourselves to either moving in this direction, or right, we're at the zig or the zag, we're at the crossroads right now. And I guess it wraps us back around at what you and I talked about in the very beginning with the feminine, the masculine, and which one are we feeding? Which energies are we feeding?
Yeah, and notice in I would say this is what I've been doing, noticing in myself, when am I using my masculine, when am I using my feminine? If I get pressure, which comes out.
Oh, yes.
you know, because you want to be able to, when you get pressure, your feminine comes out, because that's going to be what's going to carry through these things. It's really largely, and I don't say it's not the men's responsibility, but I mean, they're born into a male body, probably have more masculine energy than we do, I would say. So it should come more naturally to us to operate in the feminine, because our bodies are organized to flow with feminine energy. So it's up to us to kind of, when we get pressure, what do we do?
Tell me, for you, Gina, what is that when you are under pressure? What does it look like? What would, if I were with you at that time where you were under pressure, what would I be seeing from you that would demonstrate to me that you were in your feminine power? What does it look like?
Yeah, so I'm still practicing, so you wouldn't catch
Yeah.
me there 100%. But if I'm operating in it for me, I'm much more relaxed. I seem much more curious. I'm more asking the person questions and letting them walk themselves through a process. I'm not knee jerk responding to their comments. Like if they say, well, you're stupid, I'm not going like, no, I'm not. I'm going like, okay, that's a perspective, what is it about me that makes you think I'm stupid? It's an understanding. It's kind of like an interchange. That's one way. And it's not coming from that fear, because anytime that fear comes up, when the fear comes up, the ego is likely to come out. So it's kind of, you wouldn't see the ego, you'd see more of a relaxed kind of like, hmm, okay, you have that perspective. Like I said before, with some people, I'll say, I have a different perspective. Would you like to hear mine? And if they say no, I don't tell them. you know if they say, yeah, I'd like to hear your perspective, and I was like, okay, well, here it is, versus saying, you're going to hear my perspective, I'm going to tell you what it is, and you're going to sit and listen to me, and I'm not, you've got to hear my side the way it's kind of like trying to attract them into wanting to hear my side, or wanting to hear my perspective, versus
And that's
forcing
ego, right? That's
it.
coming from ego.
Is when you're trying to force it, you're coming from ego, versus attracting them being curious and wanting. And sometimes that means you listen to them first. You let them go all the way through their thing without countering them or whatever, so they feel fully heard. And you are taking in their perspective, and then, you're balancing that out. So that's kind of generally, and I'll say I'm still learning. We all are. Um, Fortunately for me, I have people in my life that call me on it when I'm not. And they'll go, "What?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I've done it again." Because I've
I
learned.
find right now I'm really getting to practice, and thank you so much for sharing that perspective with me, because I think oftentimes we have this misnomer that the feminine energy is passive,
Right.
or doesn't have an opinion, or is just going to be okay with what, that, like you were saying, the Pollyannish perspective is really, I think, again, what society has wanted the female energy to be like, right? So that the man can come in and dominate, and or be more dominating, and or male energy, I'm going to say, not men, but male energy. And so thank you so much for sharing that perspective with me on what it looks like, because I think so many of us learn from that experiential interaction, or exchange, than just, we know that. I mean, I've read every self-help book that's probably out there, and it's one thing to read it in wording. It's another to actually get to exchange that with another person. And so when in listening to your definition of what it looks like and feels like, um my oldest son, who is here in Las Vegas, and my daughter-in-law are on the other end of the political spectrum from my own beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And they came over for dinner the other night, and I gave them full arena after we'd had dinner, and we were sitting outside, and my little grandbaby had gone to bed, and just some adult time, and I just let them for probably about an hour express, their support of Black Lives Matter, and their support of defunding the police department, and all the things that, that mean something to them. And Gina, I offered nothing. I gave them an ear, and I gave them a non-judgmental platform to be able to express themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not, at the end of it, say, would you like my perspective? I thought, tonight, I want to let it stand that they've been heard. They know I'm different, because they know. I didn't need to say it. And
Right.
it just felt, when they left that night, there was so much hugging and love, and I love you, and exchange. And I thought, I brought peace to the situation, and I brought my femininity to allowing them to express themselves in a safe place.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And oftentimes the resistance that you would give them by trying to explain your way just holds them in their perspective. By you not resisting, it allowed them to walk away, and they can let it ruminate in their own mind. Like you said, they already know kind of your perspectives on that. Yeah, very much so.
So I guess we're both, I mean, what it, by you sharing your your beliefs and how it feels to be in that place with me, it gave me the permission to see that I'm practicing it too right now.
Hmm.
And who knew? Because I would say to you, a year ago, if we were in the situation that we're in now collectively a year ago, I would have still had a lot of fight in me.
Hmm.
I would
Me.
have had a lot of that masculine. I always think about that saying that I've heard for years: do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And I've thought about that over the years, because there's really that side of me that loves to be right, that wants to dominate and think at the end of the day, wow, I got my opinion across and that was the right one. But it's when I pull back, and I don't know, it feels like a softness to me. Like, it felt very soft for me that night. And there was nothing, I have to tell you, again, a year ago, I would have been so triggered in my solar plexus around what they were saying.
Mhm.
It would have almost been like drinking poison. I would have thought, oh my God, I can't believe they think like this. I can't believe that. How did I raise him? He's my child. There would have been all that narrative in my own brain.
Right.
But that night, there was no solar plexus hit. And I've noticed that's one thing I have noticed a lot. And I know they say we're moving from 3D to 4D, right, as a collective. And I've thought a lot about that with our chakra system, and that the third chakra is the solar plexus.
Hmm.
Fourth chakra is the heart space. And is that what that's symbolizing? Is that we're moving from living from the solar plexus or the masculine to the fourth chakra, or the more of the feminine, more of the place of love and compassion and acceptance? But that's what that felt like that night when the kids drove away, and I thought, oh my gosh, I, I'm blown away that I wasn't triggered in the solar plexus. I wasn't. It wasn't there.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
guess that's the alchemy of it, right? That's that transmuting of it.
Yeah, you were a complete piece. It wasn't, you didn't feel like you needed to save them. You didn't feel like you had to convince them. You trusted, you were open. And they, I imagine, thought more deeply about their position following that conversation than they probably had prior, because they weren't having to defend their position with you.
Whoa, that's big.
Yeah. And the other thing on the heart chakra piece that came for me as of late was, if you think we're talking about balance, so you have the higher chakras that are all about like um, collect or contact to the universe and to source, and intuition coming in this way, and then you have this security, the earth connection, and
You're
the
grounding.
security, the power and everything coming to your heart is the balance part.
It's the center, right?
It's the center, and it's the balance part, and it can be, it can be a good marriage in both masculine and feminine once it's in balance.
Oh, I love that, Gina.
So it has two lobes. It's like it's the marriage. It's the to me it's that divine marriage of the masculine and feminine in each of us. And if we can stay in that space, then that's what gets permeated out. It's not that I'm never going to use masculine. There are times when my masculine is needed, but
Yes.
it's like not be distorted, not be manipulated. I want it to be used when it's good to be
Necessary.
used, and not just my tool that I use for everything.
Your
Yeah.
default.
Right.
That's how that when I go back over the years, and of course over the years there were times that I was definitely in my feminine,
Hmm.
but my feminine back then was more of seduction,
Hmm.
coercion, manipulation. That was what I thought the feminine, and that's why I really wanted to know your perspective of what it was to be in your feminine that way, because in years past my feminine looked like that, and I was really good at using it that way. My wiles, I guess they call it, right? Our feminine wiles.
Yeah, that's
I had
that
that
dark side of the feminine I was talking about. That's the
that's like,
distorted feminine.
yes,
Hmm. Yeah.
yes, and I know her well.
Hmm.
Again, default.
Hmm.
So I was either in the dark part of my feminine, in that place, or I was in my masculine, the force, the control, the push, the shove, the need to be right. And again, it's all so fascinating. And who knew that if you would have asked me 10 years ago at 47, that at 57 I would be undergoing yet again another immense transformation, or whatever wording we want to put on this, I would have said, oh, you're crazy. By then I'm going to have it all figured out and I'm just going to know everything. And it nothing could be further from the truth. But again, it's just you used this word quite a while ago in our conversation, the word discernment. That's to me, and my prayer when I began this awakening, my prayer, and again, I don't even know that I knew what I was praying for at that point, but there was three things I was praying for: discernment, humility, and grace.
Mhm.
That was almost my mantra for years. God, give me more. Give me that sense of more discernment and more grace and more humility.
Mhm.
And I think again, that's that balanced place, for at least for me, from my perspective, of being more in grace with others. Because to me, and I find myself saying this to myself quite often when I'm not feeling graceful: Sherry, extend grace. Why do you want to extend grace? Because you can,
Mhm.
for no other reason.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what God extends to each of us, right? That shard and not inside. I love that word that you used. She, God, creative energy, extends that to us constantly. It's
Mhm.
always grace.
Yep.
Sometimes I get this vision that God is just, we as his children or her children, he just looks at us with this smile like, oh, there they go again. But I love them so much. You know,
Yeah.
I just feel so, I love them and I want to extend all this grace to what they're going through,
Mhm.
the foibles of humanity.
Mhm.
And so grace, why? Because I can.
Mhm.
And I think that muscle, the more you feed it, build that and feed that muscle, man, when you extend grace, it just comes, that's your default.
Absolutely.
And
Grace.
that's how I felt that night with the kids. It just extended grace all over that.
Mhm. Absolutely. And you were in joy the whole time. You were in love the whole time. You weren't scared or fearful or and that was the bubble that you created. And that's kind of how you can any of these differences that we have. We can if we don't need to change the other person, you can hold it so differently. And just, the interaction is so differently if you don't need to change the other person and you just show up and witness and provide space. I call it holding space for people.
Holding space.
Yeah.
Do you think that and I almost hate to use just our president, because I agree with you. I think it's a grouping, right? It's a definitely a collective that's on board with this one. He just signed up for the role as the face of it, right?
Yes.
He's the forefront guy. But do you think that do you think that's the energy that they're coming with?
Yes. For a
That
lot.
that balance between the masculine and the feminine?
I think that's what's yeah, I do think that's what's coming. I think that's been behind it pretty much all of the decisions and things that were made. Again, balanced. Sometimes you use masculine, sometimes you use feminine. It's balanced. It's all working in concert with each other. But
Wow.
it's based off that balance. Now, the media and stuff are not going to show that. They want to show it differently, and sometimes I think he deliberately puts things out there just to get them spun off on something so we can see how asinine
Well,
things.
I honestly, and I don't know if you agree with this, but I honestly I don't think anything that he either tweets or that comes out of his mouth has so much layered intention behind it.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Yeah.
I
Everybody
mean,
has,
it's
like, their emotional reactions, but honestly, no. Mm-mm. I don't think so.
did you I think we've talked about this at the day after election, and how, oh, I know we did. I know you and I talked about this, and I want to say it was the last time we spoke, that how we both felt like a collective,
Yes.
oh, it was like, we're going to be okay.
Oh, yeah.
And do you think that that's now, looking with you bringing all of this amazing insight up about the masculine and feminine, the balance? Do you think that that's what we collectively felt?
Mm,
Not all of us, but
yeah, and that goes into what I was saying earlier. At that time, there was the energy of the collective was like, "We are not going down that path any further. We're going this way."
okay,
And I really feel like that switch happened that night because we were going down a path that was going to be further distortion, and magnified distortion. And I think we all saw the trajectory, not all of us, but enough people around the world saw that trajectory in whatever venue. We had all this protests going on, the yellow vests, and I mean, there was all over. It wasn't just here in the US. And there was enough people saying, no more. we don't know what this looks like, but we don't want that anymore. And I really feel like that was the case, and it's unfolding as we're watching it now,
In
um,
real time.
in real time, and we're front row seats of it. And we're in I mean, honestly, we look at we're in my opinion, the best venue, because we kind of, I mean, everybody in the world is watching somewhat what's going on here in this country. So, I mean, we're front row seats, experiencing this. So I can't ask for any better school and lesson than to be right here with it. And then again, what role do I play? Trying to send out that positive love, staying balanced, not saying I'm soft, because feminine can be very firm, but it's done in a way that's not to obliterate. It's done in a way of collecting and bringing things back into the fold and reconnecting things, and that woven network of stuff, and moving us forward in that way. And so that every time I can do that, I do it and try to hold that ground. I'm still learning. Sometimes I don't do it 100%, but still learning how to do that myself. And I encourage, I mean, I like this conversation. I think one of the interesting things is the question came up, what is feminine energy, without comparing it or contrasting it to masculine, but what is true feminine energy? And I don't know all the answer to that. And I'm glad we're having this conversation. One of the reasons why I wanted to record it is I want to start exploring that more in the open like this, and being able to post some of these videos so people can start saying, recognizing it and contributing. And if you want to comment below and contribute, what is it for you? How does it look? What is it not? We're all learning. It's not saying, oh, you're wrong, that's not it. It's saying, well, here's another aspect of it, and here's another, and together we'll find our way through this in a clarity from heart center, not from somebody prescribing it to us, but from what are we each experiencing, and what is it truly. So I welcome the conversation on this, and anytime, with you, but also in the dialogue and stuff with others, or if anyone else wants to have this dialogue. I'll have my contact information in the video. You're more than welcome to reach out to me, and I love fostering this dialogue. But I'd like to kind of wrap this one, probably,
Yes,
Sherry, if that's good. And
absolutely, Gina. Thank you so much for so much of your time and your energy. And I think my takeaway is my big toe, my broken big toe, literally, I think guided our time today.
sorry about your toe, but not sorry about your toe.
Thank you, big toe. Oh my goodness. I mean, I got this beautiful visual, Gina, when you were talking about weaving that tapestry. And I've always loved the idea and the concept of collaboration.
Mhm.
And I think that that's, to me, that is so feminine, when we have that collaboration of women coming together to weave like they did in the indigenous, right, in the tribes, when they were putting together their fabrics, that they were all a part of weaving that together. And I think that that's really, I want to be a part of that. So thank you for letting me be a part of that, and for what you share with me. And I think the seeds that you plant for not only me, but for whoever's able to, to come on board with this conversation. So thank you for facilitating it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so good to talk with you. And I'm going to stop the recording now. And bye, everybody.
Thank you.